It's winter, and you can now get almost anything you need for the coldest months of the year delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a ski slope delivered, but you can get dish soap delivered. Sunshine, that's a no. But a bottle of wine, that's a yes. A snow angel, sorry, no. But angel hair pasta, Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol and select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
And this half hour being brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. Those are just examples of insurance needs. And look, I think all of you listening right now, unless you're somebody that's under the age of 16, you're looking around saying, I don't just have one insurance need. On that list, I got a couple, maybe 3 or 4. And Purdy Insurance does everything they can to save you money. And that's why they're the best in the business. Customer service means everything. It's at Purdy Insurance. Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Todd, great to have you with us.
Good afternoon, or good morning, I guess, to you.
It's good morning. It's 10 a.m. here. This is the last day in Los Angeles. Tonight, Penn State, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, will take on USC at the Galen Center, which is just on the other side of the highway from downtown L.A., literally. James Franklin met with the media today, talked about the running back coach position. The NFL's done hiring with new coaching staffs. The Saints will be in the mode to get a running backs coach once Kellen Moore's in place. And but a lot of people have already settled for the most part where they're going. Now, James talked about the tricky part of it. Do you want somebody that's experienced but might be on the downside of their career? All right. And now they could help immediately, but what about the recruiting part of it? There's a lot of things you've got to put in, or an up-and-comer who will grow with the program, but you really want to get somebody that's like right now, because Penn State's in that position of right now. So he talked about the trickiness of that. Jim Knowles, he said he caught a lot of heck about not going, not being allowed to go to the Ohio State parade celebration in the stadium. He said, and the reports were that the contract was all set. He said the contract wasn't all set when they were doing that. He said he could have gone and wanted to go, but that's obviously in the past for everybody. They talked about. He talked about so far today the decisions being made. One of them is about winter workouts. Normally, Penn State will do 8 to 10 winter workouts. This year, they're going to do 6. Why? Well, it goes to the timing of all this. And it was interesting because I was talking with the basketball coaches the other day about this. And I said, well, they had to give them a couple of weeks off. I said, they've had to, because they were asking about when the blue-white game was going to be. And I said, April 26th. They said, part of that is Easter's the 20th. I said, you didn't want to go before that. You'd rather go after that. Why? You'd rather go after Easter because of how late the schedule played out this year, playing your last game on January 9th and playing 16 games for the first time ever. They went, oh, that makes complete sense. Well, that now goes to this 6 workout regimen instead of 8 to 10 because of how long the season was. And, of course, those guys were all in shape, by the way, the longer the season went. but but James says they'll go with 6 workouts, and then of course they'll have after spring break they'll get going with spring practice. They'll talk about the spring game at some point, but they will do it, and because Nebraska's talking about not doing it. We've got a real treat for everybody. Matt Catrillo is going to be in the opening part of the show. This should be a wild ride. So what we'll do, and by the way, Amin Vanover had his petition to the NCAA to get an additional year rejected. I wasn't surprised by that, but the NCAA has been so unpredictable with these things. I just was waiting to see. But he tried, and he will not be back, unfortunately, because he played really, really well. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back, more in a moment, and hear from Matt, brought to you by Purdy Insurance here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The Beverage Supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Well, do we have the magic man on the line yet? Or yeah, he's ready. Okay.
Yeah, he's ready. We might have been talking. That might have been why I forgot to text you.
Yeah, after years of failure to get out of the second round by the Sixers, after the World Series failure of the Yankees, the World Series failure of Aaron Judge, Matt finally can feel good about something other than the fact that one of the kids is potty trained. No? Kid's not potty trained? I can't hear him, Todd, so.
Well, I've had 3 of my teams make at least a conference title or the championship round or championship game of their sport. So it's been a fun sports year.
One of them won, right?
Correct, but hey, it's all right. It's still fun.
If you don't finish first, what's the difference?
It's still a ride. There's still a lot of fun memories that go with it, despite the ending, especially when it hasn't happened in a while, like Notre Dame and the Yankees. So
didn't win. All right, go ahead. This is your chance to crow. Fly, Eagles, fly. I'm sure the kids were singing, and I'm sure Lisa went outside in the cold and just sat there for 4 hours.
Yes, that's pretty much the case. Lisa just sat at me in judgment, and during the Cooper DeJean pick 6, I literally lifted Mark and carried him around the room going crazy, and he was laughing as I was doing so, and it was just glorious.
All right, well, thanks for being on the segment. Enjoyed it. So.
At least for that part. So just from an overall perspective, though, as you know, I've been a big critic of Nick Sirianni, but
this is the best Eagles team ever assembled, and in the end, he did a really good job with them. And as I said yesterday on the show, and I'm fair. In other words, if I say something negative and then something goes the other way, I'm the first one to say, hey, look, credit where credit's due. Jalen Hurts played the best 2 games of his season in the last 2 games, and it was brilliant.
He was, yeah, certainly deserved MVP. Although, full disclosure, I probably still would have picked Cooper DeJean for MVP because of that play he made. That really got the game going the other way for the Eagles and started the landslide. But, I mean, obviously Jalen Hurts fully deserves it, especially how he just continued to turn it up after the pick 6, too. So he's fully deserving of that and has worked so hard to this point. Obviously, he's been through a lot. Tremendous story. I respect the heck out of him. And I'm so happy for him that he did get the MVP, but do say full disclosure, if I had a vote, I would have given it to Cooper DeJean. But having said all that, now we go to Nick Sirianni. And, of course, I've been his biggest critic. You know that. But this is the best coaching turnaround I have ever seen. From where everything ended last year to how everything started this year, and me and a lot of other people calling for his job. And he had to do a lot to win me back. And he definitely started doing so at the point when Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown story came out in terms of how was the relationship, this, that, and the other thing. He said all the right things. He handled it really well. And then came the postseason, and then the Washington loss. I thought he had the right message and handled that well. And the postseason, just continued to have the right messaging and handle it well. And I was also a big critic of this whole CEO approach of him just stepping back and being like the CEO of the team and letting the coordinators handle everything, because I just didn't think he had I just didn't think he would be able to let him go on the offense side of things. But it worked out because it's just the way he led the team. I think that this really did work out. But now that Kellen Moore's gone, now the question mark comes back again. We'll deal with that another time, of course. But just bottom line, this was the biggest coaching turnaround I have ever seen, and Nick Sirianni deserves that contract extension hands down.
Oh, no, that'll be one of the things that they'll have to do, because you can't have your coach, after winning the Super Bowl, have only 1 year left in his contract. And that'll be one of the first things they'll have to do with him. I mean, Sirianni did a fine job. I'm still not, with all due respect, I've never been a big Kellen Moore guy. I'm still not a big Kellen Moore guy. Look, it's all about personnel. I don't think it takes a genius, seriously, to sit there and say, give the ball to Saquon Barkley. I mean, to be honest with you, no. And to put in a play-action passing game, Barkley's brilliance in that game was every time Hurts faked it to him, 7 Chiefs came up and they had one-on-one coverage on the outside. It was amazing what one guy, the domino effect of one guy without the football, can have on the impact of the game. And to be honest with you, it's not a difficult game to call when you've got that. So, I mean, they've got that the next 2 years.
Yeah, and maybe more. We'll have to see, especially if he keeps this up. But, yeah, I do agree that I think Kellen Moore is better off staying with the Eagles than taking the head coaching job of the Saints.
No, I disagree with you on that. There's a time in your life you have to do something. And he was with the Cowboys a long time, Matt. 1 year with the Chargers, 1 year here. The time is, like, at his age and time of life, he's got to find out. Right? Because if it doesn't work, he can still be a coordinator after this someplace else. But this, when the job with the Saints is open because they're a bad team. Okay? And that's I mean, the Eagles slid back. How did they get Nick Sirianni? Because they slid back. So, I mean, that's how coaching changes happen, unless there's somebody in the pinnacle of their career and says, hey, I just won 3 Super Bowls in a row. I think it's time for me to call it quits. That doesn't happen that much. Okay.
Oh no, yeah, no. I get that this is the time for him to go get it. I wasn't shocked at all that he was gonna leave, because his name has been in the circle for a while. I just think he's going to end up being one of those guys that is a good coordinator, not a good head coach. But I could be wrong. He could have a lot of success in New Orleans. We'll have to see. He's got a lot of work to do. I just think that he's going to be a better coordinator than head coach. But like I said, I could be wrong about that.
Well, it could be, because Vic Fangio's been a better coordinator than head coach. But again, part of it is every time you take one of these jobs, 8 times out of 10, you're taking over a bad team. When Vic Fangio went to the Broncos, they weren't good. So sometimes you can't tell, because it's like being the first overall pick in the draft. I don't understand why he's not having success. I don't know. The team stinks. That's why they picked first.
There you go. Yeah, exactly right. So we'll have to see how that plays out there. But as far as Fangio goes, I mean, this is about as good a turnaround as you're ever going to see of a defensive unit. Again, considering where things were at the end of last year, first 4 games of this year, and it was just amazing to see the amount of growth this defense took from a total unit perspective and from a lot of individuals. I mean, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Zach Bond, the biggest of them all, Cooper DeJean, and then Quinyon Mitchell, the season that he had this year. I mean, it's been just amazing of the core that's back, and I definitely think Howie Roseman, the first two moves he needs to make is give Sirianni the extension and sign Bond to a long-term deal. Those are, to me, the first 2 moves he needs to make. Yeah. But they need to that growth that the defense took this year was just truly remarkable. I mean, that was the true definition of a team, of a unit, and a group of players getting better and better each and every week.
Well, there's more to it than that. Let's start with this. Let's give Howie a lot of credit because he looked at Bond and said he can play a linebacking spot and not a defensive end spot. So he understood placement of player. That was great. For Vic Fangio, when you have a preseason where nobody plays, and this is for every team in the league, your first month, you're trying to figure out what people can and can't do because you couldn't use them in preseason games. All right? So the first month they're 2-2 because, in part, and they're not playing well defensively because not everybody knows how everything works. Then, to the credit of Cooper DeJean, he does enough to convince Vic Fangio, I'm good enough, trust me. And he did trust him. And by trusting him, the trust paid off because the player made him trust him. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. You can talk about the genius of this, that, and the other thing. The player has to do things that make the coordinator trust they can do it. DeJean, I'm not surprised. You know how high I was on him getting picked anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what it comes down to. That first month, they're 2-2. They're not playing well. Barkley's not getting the ball that often. But nobody has a preseason anymore. All this stuff you used to null out in preseason. Play a quarter, play a half, get into the second half, then maybe not play the last game. That doesn't happen anymore. The preseason's happening in the opening month. Some of the worst football of the year is in the opening month.
Yeah, no question. It's probably about to get worse if you get the 18th game looking like not this season, not next season, but the year after next. So we'll have to see about that. And then with Cooper DeJean, the other biggest thing I just realized this was he had the preseason injury. He missed a good chunk of training camp and had to work his way back. And look how we finished. I mean, it's just everything you think about with the turnaround of this team. It really is just unbelievable how it's now turned into the greatest season in franchise history, and obviously the greatest season of my lifetime and the greatest Eagles game in that Super Bowl on Sunday of my lifetime. It really was. It was just astonishing of how well they played and how much they just dominated the Chiefs from start to finish. I just couldn't believe it. It was absolutely astonishing.
Actually, I could, because on Friday's show, I pretty much made it plain as to how I felt. I said, look, there's only one team that can blow out the other team. That's exactly what I said. That's the Eagles. The Eagles can blow this team out. I said the only way the Chiefs can win is if it's a close game. I said in terms of blowout. I mean, Todd didn't do the show Friday, but that's what I said. I said, look.
¿Dónde están los $5 millones que me robaste?
Gloria tendrá que encontrar el dinero. Su vida y la de su hijo dependen de ello.
Hay que acorralar a la viuda.
¡Tengo mucho miedo, mamá!
El peor de los caminos será el único posible.
A mí no me importa ir a la cárcel con tal de salvar a mi hijo.
En la nueva superserie de Telemundo.
Esta mujer es clave. Es en la cacería.
La Jefa. Martes 18 de febrero a las 10:09 Centro por Telemundo.
That's the bottom line. So I wasn't surprised.
I thought the Eagles could definitely win. I thought they were the better team. I just didn't see them going up 24-0 at the half, 34-0 at one point, and the Chiefs not even crossing midfield until very late in the third quarter. That was just crazy.
The DeJean play was a big play, but the biggest single play of the game was the Bond interception. Right at that point, Kansas City, even though they're backed up in their own, and they're in a potential 2-for-none because they could drive down, score, and get the ball to start the second half. Bond's interception, and I talked to Jack Ham yesterday. He said that guy has unbelievable hands to make that play.
Yes.
And I thought that was the single biggest play of the game.
No question.
Are you going to the parade?
I would love to, but actually I've got duty calls Friday night for our PHAC championships, or else I would be.
I mean, you could take the kids down there. They'd be confused.
I'd probably lose at least one of them, so I think it's probably best I just watch from home.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15, Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford Kia Hyundai, best in new inventory. Great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. And a terrific service department that backs it up every step of the way. Whether it happens to be routine, difficult, quick lane inspections, whatever it may be. It's all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, online at sunburymotors.com. You already start looking to next year, and this is the time of the year that, and I'm going to get into this with Neil Coulong at some point, because we're now heading into the combine part. We're then heading into the free agency part, which then leads into the draft, which will be in Green Bay this year. And, you know, the Eagles being the champions, I mean, they're drafting 32nd, which you expect because they're number one. But when you look at the Steelers, for example, and there are plenty of Steeler fans around here, again, this is the issue that you face when you're good enough to make the playoffs. And I'm not advocating missing the playoffs. I am not in any way, shape, or form advocating missing the playoffs. I'm not big on that. Right? But when you're good like they have been, and they've been good enough to make it, not good enough to advance, you kind of get stuck in that no man's land of the league. And I've always referred to it as the Atlanta Hawks syndrome. For years and years, the Hawks were always good enough to make the playoffs, get in as the 8th seed. This is before they expanded the playoff in the NBA to the play-in dates, you know, where your seeds 7 through 10 play each other. So, but they get in as the 8th seed. They play the number 1 seed. Many times they were good enough to get the number 1 seed to a deciding game, but then get eliminated. And then what would happen is, because they made the playoffs, they're not in the lottery. They're their first or second pick after the lottery is over with, which means they're always getting the middle of the road pick. Now, one year I think they had the first overall pick last year. They took Ricochet, who's been, I don't know, I guess okay. Well, look at the Steelers. They're drafting 21st. All right. Some things have to happen in front of them. Like the Eagles last year, things broke well for them to get Quinyon Mitchell, so they didn't have to move. And it broke for them in a way where suddenly offensive tackles were being taken left and right, including the Steelers taking one. Quarterbacks being taken left and right. And the Eagles didn't need a quarterback. So, and now, And so the Eagles didn't have to make any moves because the people in front of them weren't taking corners. It's not like a couple of years ago when, corners were taken left and right and Joey Porter fell to the 32nd pick in the draft. Okay. Right? So the Eagles were fortunate. The guy they wanted, as they're watching the draft play out, they're like, there's nobody going to pick a corner in front of us. It's tackles. It's quarterbacks. And as time went, things fall into place. Well, the Steelers have a lot of needs at 21. They're going to need some things to fall into place in front of them because, number one, this is not a quarterback deep draft. If it makes you feel better, by the way, Eagle fans will love this. The Cowboys draft 12th. But Tennessee's 1, Cleveland's 2, Giants are 3, Patriots 4, Jags are 5, Raiders 6, Jets 7, Carolina 8, New Orleans with Kellen Moore now as their head coach 9, Bears 10, 49ers 11. Watch out for them as to what they pick here. Now, I guess Deebo Samuel's been given permission to seek a trade. Cowboys 12, Miami 13, Indianapolis 14, Atlanta 15, Arizona Cardinals 16, Bengals 17, Seattle 18, Tampa Bay 19, Denver 20, Steelers 21, Chargers 22, Packers 23, Vikings 24, Houston 25, LA Rams 26, Ravens 27, Lions 28, Washington 29, Buffalo 30, Kansas City 31, Eagles 32. It'll be interesting to see what the Rams do because they haven't re-signed Matthew Stafford yet. Right. So we got a lot of stuff like that going on right now. Very interesting. But that's the next phase. The NFL dominates the year, I think, except for the month of June. Month of June, I think, is the only month for the NFL it's quiet. They've just completely taken over the cycle. And football does, period. I mean, James Franklin sits there and talks to the media today back in State College. Right, it's the big story. He's out there. He's talking about Jaywan Sider going to Notre Dame in the process of a running back coach. He's talking about the process of getting Jim Knowles to be the defensive coordinator. And as I pointed out when Jim was hired, I said, look, this wasn't the first go-around with James and Jim Knowles. They had talked earlier, a few years ago about him stepping in. And then, talking about the winter workout plan and how playing later into the year and playing as late as the night of January 9th and playing a 16-game schedule as opposed to playing 13, pushed everything back anyway. So instead of doing 8 to 10 winter workouts, he says Penn State's scheduled to do 6. And I'm talking about beyond what they're doing in the weight room and so forth, right? Which then, of course, they're going to start later on spring practice. And Easter played a role in that, okay? Because Easter is the 20th. The blue-white game is going to be the 26th. But my point is he's meeting with the media today, which means he's talking football today, which means football's being covered today, and football dominates the cycle. It's the most popular sport in the country by a wide margin.
Did he get into the spring game at all? I just wondered if anybody asked him if he had thought about canceling his spring game like Matt Rule did.
Penn State is going to play the spring game.
Okay.
He says it's too important to the community. And because it's too important to the community, they want to play it. Now, there are going to be certain guys, though, that you're not going to see in the spring game. Veterans are going to get, veterans that have been there, been there, done that part. Like I remember Olu a couple of years ago, last year, like a guy like Tyler Warren and so forth. They'll do all the walkthroughs. Like, for example, Tyler did all the walkthroughs last year, and did some other work as well. But with Andy putting it in the offense, they're a part of that. Well, for all the defensive players, with Jim on defense, any veteran that's been there, done that, and they've decided they may do walkthroughs. Like, I'm talking about veteran kind of guy. But the hitting part, they'll stay away from. They don't need that. You don't need to do that in the spring. All right, so he did talk about that. Now, down the road, and I don't mean this year or even next year, all right, you do have to think about it. But one thing about the spring game part of it, Matt Rule says they're not going to play it. And they're concerned about the transfer portal. Look, they're going to go after your players anyway, Matt. There's nothing they're going to show in the spring game where somebody's going to sit there and go, son of a gun, Bobby's really terrific. They already know that. They've already scouted this part all the way through. And the player is going to know where they stand on the depth chart. And they're going to look around and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to look around. I want, there's going to be money out there. I mean, so that's why I disagree with Matt on canceling the spring game, Matt Rule. Because I just don't, there's no way on the planet that a spring game is going to like, hey, I think I should transfer. Or the spring game is like, hey, we got to go get Bobby. Like, I don't think so. They've already made up their mind usually before the spring game, and people have made up their mind before the spring game that they were and have made contact with intermediaries.
That's not legal. Sorry, I couldn't even keep a straight face.
Intermediaries, you can get messages to people. They already know going into it. So I know people make a big issue with this. I think eventually there's going to be more of an OTA model. Okay? And they're already transitioned into OTAs anyway. But spring games have always been great for the sport. Now, it's not great when a Pete Massaro, for example, hurts his knee like he did for Penn State in a spring game. I mean, that's the only part you worry about with these spring games, as far as I'm concerned. But it's great for the fans to get out there. And this is what I've always said about spring games. I can remember, I don't know how many years ago I was driving in, and I had traffic on each side of me. And I look to the left, and I see mom, dad, kids. And I look to the right of me in the car to my right, mom, dad, kids. Because, you pay to park, but you can get into the game for free. And you sit there, and when the game is over, the scrimmage is over with, Penn State has done this great, great thing where they let everybody go on the field after the game. It's amazing how something simple like that, you can put together the greatest marketing campaign ever for a team. And sometimes it's simple as letting them walk on the field after a scrimmage that makes a young person a fan for life. I walked on the field at Beaver Stadium. This is where Saquon Barkley played. Right? This is where Jahan Dotson played. Might as well go with the Eagles. This is where Tariq Castro Fields played. And he's going to get a ring with the Eagles too. All right? This is where they played. This is where Micah Parsons played. I feel like I just ruined the mood of the Eagles fans by giving a Cowboys reference. All right, this is what, Olu played. This is where, you start going through like all the guys all the way back to, now young people wouldn't know this, but, this is where John Cappelletti played. This is where Jack Ham played. This is where, it's the same, it's the same spot. It's the same spot. You're talking about something that's been in that spot now for 65 years. And people, when they walk on that field, for them, there's a magic to it. I'll never forget walking on the field at Notre Dame for the first time. I'm like going, I thought about all the people that had played there. Now, this is before they got artificial turf. But and of course, they changed the grass over. You understand that. You can't play on the same turf all the time. But you still think about, like, this is the plot of land where they played. And that means something. And so that's why with the spring game, just the value of that at the end, you're trying to get young people. We always talk about the 18 to 34 demographic to get into and love sports. And it's difficult. It's a video game era. It is an era of fantasy football. How can you get them interested in watching the games on TV? How can you get them interested in going to games? And in some small way, that 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old throwing a football on the field after a spring game sometimes is enough to make them a fan for life, because it's one of the coolest experiences. They go home and tell all their friends they did it. I was throwing the ball on the field at Beaver Stadium after the game. What? Really? So, is there value in the spring game? There is value in the spring game, because I think just the ability at the end to walk on the field is greater than any marketing campaign you can put on there.
The cynical side of me wonders if they're going to have a spring game and use it as a way to raise money, and maybe those that donate get to go see them scrimmage at the end of spring practice. I mean Nebraska. I don't mean that.
They probably will. I think what more and more people are doing is that they're opening up a practice, and sometimes it's 2, and they're charging people to get into the practice. And that has been happening at more and more places. We're gonna have an open practice, but there's a donation to get into it. And I think you'll see more and more of that happening. You can't open up every practice. There's certain things you want to keep to yourself. I think that'll be one of the, so I understand the cynicism of it, and I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
How about that? I think it's already happening in its own way. And I think you'll see more and more of that. How about that?
Because, I mean, we had talked about Tennessee adding the 10% surcharge of the football tickets. Did you see they did it to the basketball and the baseball tickets now, too?
Right. No, and that I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, but what's interesting is Tennessee felt free to do it for basketball and baseball because of the positive reception they received on the football move. The fans were positive about it. They're like, okay, if that's what it takes to get players, we'll do it. And, it doesn't mean every single Tennessee fan felt that way, but a lot of them did.
It also helps that that's 3 really strong programs right now as well.
They are 3 strong programs. It's hard for me to imagine Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee baseball's popular. I don't know how close they are to breaking even financially.
No.
Now, I will tell you this. There are actually 2 non-football basketball programs in the Big Ten that made money last year. You know which two they are? One of them you probably can strongly guess. The other one will then make complete sense to you.
I was going to go out on the limb and say like Northwestern Field Hockey.
No.
Nothing weird like that.
I mean, let me put it this way: that branch will break in seconds. It is Nebraska women's volleyball.
Oh, yeah, that's
they made $1.3 million in profit last year. The other one that made like $1.6 million was, and again, this will make sense as well, Minnesota men's ice hockey.
Yeah.
They're the only two non-football men's basketball programs that made money in the recent reporting, which again tells you a story, because that means guess who didn't make a profit last year?
Everybody else? Any wrestling team?
No, I wasn't even talking about wrestling. I mean, that's a given. I mean, Iowa lost $1.4 million on wrestling or something like that. Iowa women's basketball
I still can't believe that.
did not make money last year. Yeah, that can't be. No, it actually can be. Because again, the problem is the expenses. The expenses are big. I mean, when they put that game on in the football stadium, at Kinnick Stadium, when they played, I think it was an exhibition game with DePaul, and the proceeds went to benefit the Children's Hospital. But just to stage the game cost a lot of money. Just to stage it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, sometimes there's just more expenses to all this than people realize. It's very hard to, and with all this travel we've got going on right now, in college sports, I mean, Penn State took a 737 out here to get here. I mean, the last time Penn State played on the West Coast, I want to say may have been the 95 Cable Car Classic in San Jose. I'm talking about basketball. No, that's wrong. You know what? That's wrong. The last time they played out here was the 2001 Cal Berkeley Classic. But you're talking 23 years ago. They haven't played a game in California since. You know, that was a 2-game tournament. This is 2 regular season games. But, I mean, look, there's an expense to staying in this hotel for 5 days. There's an expense to the length of the charter. Okay? Charters go by miles. How long is, so a charter to go to Lincoln, expensive. A charter to go further to California, much more expensive. It's just the way it is. Is that your phone ringing?
No, it's not actually. It's the phone in the other room.
Are they calling the suit?
I don't know. It's weird. The phone in the other room doesn't rings in here, but our phone rings in the other room and not in here. So.
Oh, God.
The light blinks, though.
Yeah. By the way, yesterday I decided to go for a walk after the show. And altogether I probably walked 5 miles. So I said, let's plot a destination. He said, you know where I walked to yesterday? The LA Country Club. It's about 2.5 miles away. Wilshire Boulevard splits the LA Country Club. So I just, went up there, walked to Wilshire, and went over to the club, because they played the U.S. Open there 2 years ago. And, I walked up and I had a Penn State jacket on. And they said, what do you do with Penn State? I told them what I did. They said, oh. I said, have you ever covered the U.S. Open? I said, I've covered 5 of them. They went, yo. They said, hey, take your time. Look around. I was like, they couldn't have been any nicer.
You were like, twist my arm, right?
Right. So what was bad, though, is that the 3 guys came up to me, saw me standing there looking like a bum, and they asked me if I could caddy. I'm like, no, I can't do that. Right, what's going on? But, no, they were great. What a beautiful golf course. Whew. Wow. Beautiful course. But, yeah, and then on the way back, Dick said, hey, I'm on Rodeo Drive. Oh, okay. So I went over to him. I said, well, I'll meet you there. And then we ate lunch at the Beverly Wilshire yesterday. All right? So, you know life is different. Like when you go, Todd, to a restaurant and they ask you, hey, by the way, would you like bread? And, of course, you would say.
Of course.
Right. And, of course, the bread comes out. Now, when the bill comes, you see your meals on there, but there's nothing about bread, right?
Usually.
Okay, so we're at the Beverly Wilshire. They said, would you like bread? Dick and I are like, hey, it'd be great. They bring out, and the bread was terrific. We get the bill. It was $16 for the bread. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. That wasn't what we expected. We expected the bill to be high. But I said to Dick, I said, check this out. We got charged $16 for the bread.